Welcome, race fans, to Pump the Brakes, the one, the only, the Cadillac of Formula One podcast. I am your host, the Pit Lane Patriot. We are in the final week where there was no race last week, no race this week. But if this podcast is every Wednesday, no matter what, so it's every Wednesday, no matter what, people, we got a great show. We are going to go over the teams at the back of the grid that we should watch out for as our Cadillac rivals and what we can expect from Cadillac as far as success in Miami. But first, the fans, the drivers, the teams have asked, and the FIA has listened. The FIA has made adjustments to the rule set. Let's get into it. The FIA has just agreed on some mid-season tweaks to the 2026 rules. And this actually matters. The short version is, Formula One looked at the first 3 races of the new era, heard the complaints from the drivers, teams, and pretty much everybody, and decided it needed to make some adjustments starting in Miami. The goal is pretty simple. Make qualifying feel more flat out, make the racing a little safer, and reduce some of the weird energy management nonsense that we've been seeing in the first few rounds. So let's explain the problem in plain English. The new 2026 cars use a much bigger electric contribution than before, roughly a 50-50 split between electric power and the combustion engine. Now that sounds cool in theory, but in practice, it has created some ugly side effects. Drivers have had to do more battery management, more lifting, more weird coasting just to recharge their systems. Some of them were even lifting and coasting into high-speed corners, which immediately raised safety concerns. On top of that, the cars have been dealing with something called super clipping, where the system starts pulling energy away at awkward moments so the car feels like it suddenly loses a punch even when the driver is still flat out on the throttle. So what exactly did the FIA change? Well, the biggest tweak is in qualifying. Formula One's own breakdown says they are reducing the maximum permitted recharge from 8 megajoules to 7 megajoules. What the hell does that mean? Well, that basically means that the drivers won't have to spend quite as much of the time on a lap harvesting energy and nursing their battery. The FIA has also increased peak superclip power. Remember that word, superclip? It is now going from 250 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, which is meant to reduce the amount of time that the cars spend recharging. So now this is all supposed to allow drivers to push more consistently and be just, more flat out like we want to see, like what we love about Formula One. Basic idea, less energy babysitting and more actual attacking. Okay, if you're not a hardcore F1 person, here's the easiest way to think about it. Imagine a basketball player who keeps having to stop his fast break and dribble back toward the half court to recharge his stamina bar. Like if you're playing a half court game and you have to take the ball out. Imagine if every time you drove the ball, you had to go back and take the ball out. It just doesn't make any sense. So the FIA is trying to reduce that. They want qualifying to feel way more like a true all-out lap again. The most fun about qualifying, and yes, everyone should watch the qualifying, is that's when you get to see a car pushed to its absolute limit over one lap. It's not trying to win over 70. It's not trying to have the best tire management strategy. It's not trying to outpace other cars. It's simply trying to see how fast he can get around this particular track over the course of one lap. It's fun to see. They also changed some race settings for safety because safety is always a concern when it comes to a sport like Formula One. In the race, the FIA is now capping the maximum extra boost power at plus 150 kilowatts. That's the maximum boost power. Formula One says that the point of this is to reduce sudden speed differences between cars while still keeping overtake possibilities. They're also keeping the full 350 kilowatts of MGUK deployment in the key acceleration zone. Again, plain English, keep the exciting power where racing happens, reduce some of the scarier and more random speed gaps elsewhere. And that safety part is not random. Drivers have already raised concerns about dangerous speed differentials, and that came after the incident with Ollie Behrman, where the new energy behavior helped reignite the debate about whether these cars were creating way too many awkward closing speeds. So this is not the FIA randomly fiddling around with the rules. This was a real rule change, and it was for the positive. There's also a race start safety tweak that was being tested. Formula One says that a new system can detect a car that launches abnormally slow, automatically triggering MGUK deployment to help it get moving faster, and flash warning lights to alert cars ahead. Basically, all Formula One is saying is that there's technology in place to allow more smooth starts. So all of this stuff that we just talked about is going to be tested in Miami. We're going to see these new race regulations, apparently a new tech that's going to help with smoother starts. And we're going to see a lot of these changes come up in Miami. And I'll be there in person, which is going to be fantastic. So to put the easiest possible summary on what has changed in Formula One's rules from Japan to Miami is basically faster qualifying laps, fewer ugly energy management moments like the one with Behrman where he crashed, and safer speed differences in races and starts. So it should be a lot of fun going into Miami. I think this is a smart change, and honestly, it had to happen. It's not a total rewrite of the 2026 rules. Toto Wolff even said himself that it has to be done with a scalpel, not a baseball bat. But the sport saw a problem, listened quickly, and they made tweaks to give us more flat-out qualifying, cleaner racing, and better starts. So good job, Formula One.
We got it? Yep, P1.
Now, next up, we are going to talk about who I believe, after the first 3 races, are our top 5 drivers on the grid. All right, so let's do this a little differently. So we're going to leave Max Verstappen off the list. Not because he suddenly forgot how to drive, not because he isn't one of the best on the planet, but because Max has already proven. He's already shown he is on the level above the rest. At this point, debating Max almost feels like pointless. On top of that, there's like too many outside factors right now muddying his 2026 performance. The Red Bull car, the team, the regulations he clearly hates. So for this list, I'm leaving Max out and focusing on the 5 drivers who have impressed me most through the first 3 races of the season. Number 5, Pierre Gasly. And honestly, this is one of the easiest picks for me. Pierre Gasly keeps proving the same thing over and over again. He extracts the absolute maximum from cars that are not that great. Last year, Alpine was a mess, and he still found a way to nick away some points. This year, the car is better. It's not amazing, but it's better. And Gasly's already scored in all 3 races. Formula One's official news results show him taking points in Australia, China, and Japan, including a 6th in China and a 7th in Suzuka. And the biggest reason why I like the pick is the comparison right next to him. Franco Colapinto has just 1 point so far, while Gasly has 15. That tells me Alpine is still not some rocket ship. It tells me that Pierre Gasly is doing what Pierre Gasly always does, dragging way more out of the car than it probably deserves. Number 4, Oscar Piastri. This is a little projection mixed with performance, but I'm comfortable with it. McLaren's start to 2026 has been messy as hell. But when it finally looked alive in Japan, Piastri was one who really looked dangerous. He qualified in 3rd, grabbed the lead at the start, finished 2nd from McLaren in its first podium. He still only has 21 points after 3 races, so that's not me saying that he had the cleanest start out of anybody. It's me saying that when McLaren had a real weekend, Oscar looked like a real sharp weapon. And that matters. Now, I'm going to take this moment to also talk about Lando for a second. Lando's been solid. He hasn't been great, but the team's lack of performance is also Lando's lack of performance. So it's sort of 1-to-1, which is why I am not putting Lando on this list at all. If I were to, he'd be in replace of Piastri at number 4. But a champion's got to go somewhere on this list. I mean, a constructor's champion at least. So Oscar at number 4. Number 3, Charles Leclerc. Charles, I'll figure it out. Leclerc is 3rd for me because Ferrari has been the clearest challenger to Mercedes so far. And Charles has been right at the center of that. Like, he's their number 1 driver. Love Lewis Hamilton to death. He's the GOAT. But right now, Charles is their number 1 driver on the 2nd best team after Mercedes. He sits 3rd in the standings on 49 points. And he has just felt that sharp and dependable like every single weekend. He has not had like the outright winning package that Antonelli and Russell have had, but he has stayed in the fight and has had leads and great overtakes. Amazing starts, especially his start to the season in Australia. He's kept Ferrari relevant, and he looks like the strongest Ferrari driver over the first 3 rounds. Again, sorry, Lewis, but Charles in this list. You are the GOAT of all time, but right now, Charles is leading Ferrari as the best non-Mercedes driver. Number 2, George Russell. Now, George gets number 2 because he looked exactly like what Mercedes needed him to be. He won in Australia. He sits 2nd in the championship on 63 points, and has been calm, effective, and difficult to shake. If Antonelli is your breakout superstar, Russell is your guy keeping the whole thing grown up and stable. He's looked like a real team leader through the opening phase of the year, and if somebody wanted to argue that he should be the one who's number 1, I really wouldn't fight that hard. George Russell is my pick for the champion this year. He walks, talks, and drives like a champion. He's level-headed like a champion. And he's got all the makings and the car to be one. He's not number one right now, but by the end of this season, I'm betting he will be. But if it's not George Russell who's number one, that only leaves one person. At number one, we have Kimi Antonelli. At this point, I think this one is just real. I mean, he leads the championship at 72 points. He won in China, he won again in Japan, and he's become the youngest championship leader in Formula One history. Boom, period, end of story. We are way past the point of calling this a cute rookie story. Kimi Antonelli has been the best driver on the grid through the first 3 races. Sorry, George, he just has. You guys are in the same machine, and he's pulling out slightly better numbers than you. I understand that George had some difficulties that were not his issue, which is why I say that ultimately the better one will be George, and I don't think it is going to be close. I think that Kimi should enjoy this while it lasts, because once George takes over at some point during this season, he'll have it till the end, in my personal opinion. So my top 5 through 3 races, leaving Max off the board: Gasly at 5, Piastri at 4, Leclerc at 3, Russell at 2, and Antonelli at 1. And what I like about this list is that it tells the truth about the start of the season. Antonelli and Russell have owned the top end. Leclerc has kept Ferrari right there. Piastri reminded us that McLaren still has real bite. And Gasly, my boy, once again has done what great midfielders do and make a flawed car look better than it is. But that's enough talk about these champions and champion contenders. This would not be a Cadillac podcast if we did not talk about things relevant to Cadillac. So next up, we are going to talk about the 3 teams at the back of the grid that are the biggest threat to our team Cadillac. Now let's talk about Cadillac's rivals going into Miami. Because if you're trying to judge this team honestly, the worst thing you can do is compare them to Mercedes or Ferrari right now. That's just a fact. That's not our fight. The real question is, who are the teams that Cadillac should actually be measuring itself against in this early phase of 2026? For me, those 3 teams are Aston Martin, Williams, and Audi. Not because they're identical teams, but because they are the most useful reference point for where Cadillac sits right now and what progress in Miami would actually mean. All right, let's start with Aston Martin, because this is the most obvious direct comparison. As I've said in the past, their car is fucked. In the official standings, after Suzuka, Aston Martin and Cadillac were both still on 0 points. Cadillac's own post-race quotes from Japan were pretty blunt about it. Sergio Perez said that Cadillac were clearly faster than Aston Martin on Sunday, and Formula One analysts have called Japan Cadillac's strongest race so far. That matters. It does not mean Cadillac is suddenly good. It means Aston Martin is the first team Cadillac can realistically look to and say, okay, well, we should at least be fighting these guys. And Aston Martin is actually kind of a fascinating rival, because on paper, they should not be here. They've got Honda power. They've got Adrian Newey's influence, which Adrian Newey is, for those who don't know, one of the greatest car designers of all time. His designs on his cars have won multiple championships across multiple race series, including Formula One. He's undoubtedly the greatest designer of race cars ever. Formula One analysts have also stated that the start to 2026 has been tricky to say the least for Aston Martin. They have reliability and general performance problems hurting them from the start. So if Cadillac can come into Miami and look properly competitive with Aston Martin again, it's meaningful. It says Cadillac's not just surviving at the back, it's at least climbing towards a team with major resources that has stumbled very badly out of the gate. Second Cadillac rival, Williams. This one's a little bit more complicated. Williams has 2 points after 3 rounds, so technically they are ahead of Cadillac. But Formula One's own recent reviews of their season say that 2026 has not gone according to plan, as team principal James Vowles has also stated. This is not the way they expected to come out of the gate. Williams is the kind of team that should be in the midfield fight and hasn't actually established itself yet. They're not a back marker on paper or in a hopeless sense. They're a team trying to claw their way back into relevance, and that makes them a really good measuring stick for what the next step in performance looks like. And what I like about using Williams as a rival is that it forces a slightly higher standard than Aston Martin. Beating or matching Aston is one thing. Aston Martin's car is shit. Like, just the fact that we can keep it together should beat Aston Martin. But Williams is a little different. And I was originally going to start this season by talking about Alpine in this spot, but we have a sort of bit of a flip-flop between Williams and Alpine. Williams should have been around 5 or 6 in the standings, and Alpine should be here, but it's really the reverse. But it's sort of the same situation, right? So Williams is a legit team. Like, they can make podium stops and they can actually win races. They have history. So right now they're in a situation where they're performing poorly, and so we measure right next to them. So it's a good opportunity for us to be like, okay, well, can we develop as fast as a team like Williams? Maybe we can get a leg up in development over a team like that. That's a huge step forward for us. Getting closer to Williams would mean Cadillac is not just cleaning up its own act. It's the beginning. It's starting to approach the lower edge of a proper midfield fight. Like you're actually competing with a team that's going places and has gone places before. So it's very good that we're able to compare ourselves with them in terms of development. And I have a lot of hope that we will use that month off going into Miami to maybe even start to develop above Williams. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little too hopeful, but it's possible. Third team for me, Audi. And honestly, Audi might be the most interesting of the three because they are a works manufacturer in a new era and they sit only 2 points ahead of Cadillac. They're the other big name that joined the sport this year. So really, you could consider Audi our rival. They are a clean comparison point to Cadillac. It's a different structure, a different timeline, yes, but still they are a team that's trying to define itself in an opening phase of a major reset. Audi's not thriving yet, and Cadillac fans should be paying attention to that because it reminds you of just how hard this stuff is. Audi came in with a lot of stuff that Cadillac didn't come in with, and they're still not where they'd like to be or where anyone expected them to be. Even a manufacturer with Audi's reputation and scale cannot just walk into 2026 and become a force overnight. So that should definitely teach you a little bit about patience. This takes a while. We will get there. Cadillac over Audi all day. And Audi matters for another reason too, because they represent kind of a long-term benchmark for Cadillac. The next step in development for Cadillac is essentially being Audi, right? Because Audi went from team using other teams' parts to its own brand name team, German outfit with its own engine. So our next step as Team Cadillac would be where Audi is now. So looking at a team like Audi, who we're directly comparing ourselves with, who we're going to be in their stage in a couple of years, and seeing the mistakes they make, learning from them, it would almost give us an opportunity to skip their stage. We're able to, once our engine is ready, we will have learned from Audi and we will have learned from what they did with their own engine and be able to make ours even better. So not just in Miami, for every race going forward, we should always be watching out for Audi and making sure that we're matching up well against them because that is a good indicator for where Cadillac is going in the future. The better we do against Audi, the less time it's going to take for us to become what I believe will be a championship team. So the clear way I'd frame Miami is this. Aston Martin is the first team Cadillac should expect to fight. Williams is the next team Cadillac should want to get closer to. And Audi is your long-term, consistent view and your comparison that will tell you whether this project is tracking towards a works team credibility and what kind of issues we're going to see when we start implementing things like our own engine, our own people, our own outfit. It's a much healthier way to look at this weekend than just saying, did they score points or not? Points would be great, obviously, but in Miami, the more useful question is, who are they genuinely racing? So that's the rival picture going into Miami. Aston Martin is the first team that Cadillac should expect to fight. Williams is the next team that we want to creep closer to. And Audi is our longer view comparison that tells you what like a real works team's progress might eventually look like. So once you've identified who the rivals are, the next question becomes simple. What are the actual expectations for Cadillac in Miami? Not fantasy, not hype, not coping. The actual bar for our sprint race and our Grand Prix race in Miami, which I will be at. Okay, Miami's a sprint weekend. And that matters immediately because sprint weekends are harder on new teams. So the schedule is this. There's one practice session on Friday, then there's a sprint qualifying, and then there's a sprint on Saturday morning, and then the Grand Prix for qualifying on Saturday afternoon, and then race on Sunday, all of which I'll be at. So the first real expectation for Cadillac is not even about the results, it's about execution. They need to get through that one practice session cleanly, get both cars running without the old fuel system or deployment nonsense, or the little things that are very fixable that hold us back, like a goddamn mirror falling off the car. None of that in Miami. Not at home, not in our first home race. And we got to start the weekend from a stable base instead of spending half of Friday digging ourselves out of a hole. That's the very important part of this. We got to look clean. We had a month off. We coming home. Let's flex on them a little bit and show that we've got our ducks in a row at the very least. And because it's a sprint weekend, I think the expectation for the sprint itself has to stay realistic. It's not the place to demand points or pretend Cadillac should suddenly jump to the back half of the middle field on some sort of like 100K dash. Formula One explains that the sprint is roughly 1/3 race distance with no mandatory pit stop, which means there's less time for strategy to save you and less time to recover if qualifying goes badly. For Cadillac, the realistic sprint expectation is simple. Finish both cars. This has kind of been our expectation since the jump. We avoid stupid mistakes, we finish both cars, we stay clean operationally, and I personally would like us to start working towards that goal of not getting lapped. Let's try to finish on the final lap. It's a sprint race. We don't have to do too much depending on the car in the long run of like a longer race. Let's try to not get lapped in the sprint race. I'd love to see it. Now, the bigger expectation is for the full Grand Prix on Sunday. Formula One's own post-Japan analysis says Suzuka was Cadillac's strongest race so far. As far as the qualifying for the race, I'd love to see us get into Q2. Don't foresee it happening. Would absolutely love for us to get into our first Q2 in Miami, but we'll see. I mean, I doubt it, but you never know. Miami is a very clear job. Proof Suzuka wasn't just a nice weekend, but the start of something more stable in the baseline because we had a really good weekend in Suzuka. So in the race, I think the first real benchmark is another clean double finish. We want double finish in the sprint, double finish in the race. The second is that one car should look genuinely raceable against Aston Martin over the full distance. But what I want to see is us tuned up, and you know Aston Martin just spent the last month tuning up. I want to see us actually race and go head-to-head with this team. And assuming there's very few errors on them, very few errors on us, I want to see us beat them. Like, actually beat them, not just outlast them with less mistakes. So there's also the bigger emotional layer to Miami because Cadillac itself is clearly treating this as a home race. The team's news page is already full of Miami-specific activity, fanware capsules, Miami headquarters, and Miami is going to rock. Let's come home. Let's bring the team home. Let's continue this season strong. We will be right back here next week where we will discuss all things Miami. We're going to talk about F1. We're going to talk about F2. We're going to talk more about what Cadillac can perform and how they can do in Miami. All things Miami coming up in the Miami GP this time next week. See you then.